Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Love it. James, welcome your guests.
Hi, everybody. I'm James Panazzo, Executive Director of Launch LA and Launch Gallery. Thank you so much for coming to our Zoom presentation of our current show, A Journey Through Abstract Reciprocal Perspectives from the Terrestrial to the Archetyptonic Orbital. And that's a wordy way of saying beautifully crafted, original, three-dimensional artworks by Mela M Ray Beldner. And without further ado, I introduce to you Shana Nys Dambrot, who will guide us through this informational and introspective review of the work in the show. Ms.
Awesome.
Dambrot.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. So a little bit of housekeeping, as they say in Zoom land. We're going to ask everybody, except for like the panelists, to have yourself on mute for this part. And if you have any questions while we're talking, you can drop them in the chat and we'll try to keep an eye on them as we move through the part where the three of us talk. But there will be like 15 minutes reserved at the end for a Q&A as well, when we'll all get to talk to each other with our microphones on. So just to let you know, you can go either way with your questions for the artists, because we definitely, I mean, and just as a personal aside, I've done a lot of these talks over the years, and I find that artists always ask other artists the best questions. So whenever I look out into an audience like today, and I see so many artists out there, I'm like, oh, I kind of just want to skip to the Q&A part because I know it's going to be lit. So please know that we want your participation, and we're just figuring out, you know, chat box, Q&A at the end, whatever. So I'm going to say a couple things. You're not necessarily here to hear what I have to say, but I do want to set some context and set up a little bit about what we'll be speaking with, first with Ray, and then with Mela, and then, you know, all of us together, and then the audience coming into it. So basically, I feel like, first of all, as a writer, I love the title because I feel like it gives your mind, you know, a lot to chew on, right? Like you can't rush through a title like that. So it gives you this pause where you have to stop and think about, okay, you're talking about the earth, you're talking about something possibly more celestial, or definitely, you know, kind of fractal, the invisible structures that hold us all together. You know, everything, you know, gravity, like just think forces of nature at will. And the fact that there's this invisible kind of, you know, armature hanging on which earthly forms hang. But of course, armature is also a term from visual art having to do with how you organize the kind of bones of your image or your object, your picture. And I love how meaty the title is, because I think that with work that is so vibrant and with so much color and with so much magic in the shapes of the objects and the way that they're installed a little bit unconventionally, that, you know, the mind kind of wants to just like run into the candy store and, you know, be in there tasting everything, because it's such a kaleidoscopic, vibrant thing full of these big effects and tiny little details and color. And there's so much emotion and so much energy and different kinds of energy. And it's all this big ball of this aesthetic experience. And I love that the way the title kind of forces you to slow your roll a little bit on that and kind of like come into this universe another way. To bring, you know, the mind along with the senses. And so just as a writer, like, I just want to say, I appreciate that, the dynamic that sets up, because work like this is so grabby that, you know, you might forget to think because you're having so much experience. But actually, there's a huge amount to think about with this work as well. So that's kind of like the shape of the conversation that I want to foster with the artists. And I'm going to ask both of you kind of like Ray first, just because that's, I guess, alphabetical. But, you know, I would really love if you could each just take a moment and unpack for the audience, and the gallery will be sharing the PowerPoint with your images going by as we're talking. And you can always say, Ray and then Mela, you know, stop on that one or go back to the other, whatever you need while you're discussing your ideas. But beginning with you, Ray, I mean, I just kind of want to say, like, talk about how you deal with color and shape in the context of the structure and the architectural kinds of dimensional elements at the same time as you're dealing with all of the way that color operates in a painting practice, because this is sort of painting plus in a way. So if you could just talk a little bit about like why you do it, that, what it means to you, how you got to that point, you know, of the new work, etc. I think we'd love to hear that.
Cool.
So,
okay.
Ray Beldner, everyone.
Thank you. First, let me thank everybody who's here tonight. This is great turnout, and I didn't expect 50-something people. That's awesome. Thanks to James for setting it up and Shana for moderating it. I really appreciate that. And thanks, Mela, for agreeing to be in this show with me. First off, I just want to give you a little bit of background about me. The work I did prior to this was pretty conceptual, but it always had some kind of basis in art history. It was always some kind of homage to other artists. I did a series of work for about 10 years called Counterfeit, where I remade famous works of the 20th century out of money. And it was a way to talk about art and art's value, its various, you know, historic, intrinsic, economic, social value. And so I've, you know, as an artist, grown up on all these historic, canonical artists. And I've never felt like artwork is 100% original. We're all building off each other. And so that's what I've always done, both because I'm in awe of the precedents that came before me, and I also see it as material to work with. So that's, previous work was riffing on other artists, in other words. Let me just say something about the title. That's 100% Mela. I love that title because it's like the titles of her work. It's long and involved and both funny and yet strangely accurate, because, you know, what she's expressing in that title is that we're coming at this abstract bodies, these abstract bodies of work from two different perspectives. I'm the terrestrial, she's the architectonic orbital that exists out in the stratosphere. And she'll talk more about it. And I love that, how she frames her work. Yeah, the show is a color bomb. It's got a lot going on in it. This work of mine is a body of work I've been working on for a couple of years. They all started out as little tiny collages, little, you know, 5x5, 8x10 collages, because I was trying to get back into making art after several years of not doing work. And, you know, I produced the Startup Art Fair. It didn't leave me a lot of time for work. So when I got back into my studio, the easiest thing for me to do was take those art history books, which were scattered all over my studio that I refer to constantly for other things, and just tear them up and put them back together again. And so all of this stuff started as very modest, abstract works that I had very little idea of what direction they would go. So the conceptual work, in a sense, was kind of easy for me. Like Saul LeWitt said, the idea is the machine that makes the work. So once you have the idea, the work just kind of happens. I did a body of work called 101 Portraits, which I exhibited in LA in Annie Seton's studio about, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. And they were all portraits of well-known people where I source the images from the internet. I took the first 101 images and then I basically squished them all together in Photoshop to get a kind of a meta portrait over time. And that was, again, it was this idea where that drove the final result. So I almost always knew what the final result would be. But with these works, I never know what the final result will be. They're completely a formal exploration. And as I developed them, they just naturally wanted to become more sculptural. So I started working with various materials to bring them off the wall and to make them bigger. And I finally settled on making laser cut panels, because I could take the images that I made on a small scale and have them blown up and laser cut onto plywood. And then I could print that same material larger on my big Epson printer and collage it. So they just went from tiny, modest, little regular horizontal collages to shaped collages to really giant collages. And this body of work is almost all the shapes are inspired by Henry Moore. I just got really fascinated with his kind of play between figuration and abstraction. And I just love the forms that he created. And they're so, I don't know, just beautiful and organic. And so I just took those exact forms, but I'm using more contemporary painting materials or painting images on top of it. So, this piece, for example, which is called Pretty Howtown, is a Henry Moore sculpture, but the painting on top of it is like, somebody who's a contemporary artist showing in New York. I'm spacing out on the name. So there's kind of a play between, the past and the present, and there's kind of a play between 3D and 2D and painting and sculpture. Abstraction and figuration, because a lot of them tend to look like figures. That sort of came out of the material I was using, because I am using shapes that are inspired by Henry Moore. You can't avoid that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my question is, sort of like, is it me, or does that look like a fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Landscape, figure, creature,
yeah.
right? And, the mind will help you. It wants that, right? And so, but of course, Henry Moore, it's like a flipped telescope, right? Like he took recognizable forms and abstracted them as far as he could while keeping them recognizable. And then you kind of reached back for that. And there's something about how I feel that I'm going to be looking at abstract art, but I end up really deciphering the imagery. Yeah.
My goal with all this work is to make it so visually complex and playful that you can't really stop in one spot, that any attempt to make meaning of it is thwarted because you keep visually moving through the pieces. And I'm trying also, sometimes more successfully than others, to create the impression of 3D space with 2D forms. And that's very, very difficult. And but that's been another goal of the work, is to make pieces that are flat, but yet feel like they occupy more space than they do.
I love that. I mean, they're really, they're really strange. And I, in that sense of strange, just not meaning like weirdo, but meaning just simply not familiar. Or, and so you're in this moment where you really have to grapple with the whole object. You can't just like see it. You have to interact with it at a much more time-based framework to kind of figure it out. Which is
sculpture makes you do that. Sculpture makes you interact with it physically, and it's time-based. And these pieces in particular, they're double-sided. So I don't know if we have an image of the backside of this, but each one of those has a different image on the other side. So it's kind of a nice surprise, and that was the intention, is that they should constantly, the freestanding one should constantly surprise you. The other thing I did in this, I always had trouble titling my pieces, and when the work was more conceptual, they were generally just titled like Untitled Number 1, Untitled Number 300. Yeah, it was so boring. But one of the things since I'm reaching back into art history to modernist sculpture, I reach back into, poetry from the modernist period. So all these are titled from E.E. Cummings poems, just little snippets that were kind of evocative, like the one before this, the other shape we were just looking at, is called Slipshod Mucus Kiss. And the one with the colorful stripes is called Pretty Howtown. And those are out of E.E. Cummings poems. And I love his poems because they're very playful and yet descriptive at the same time.
And abstract. Their relationship to language is very abstract. And also he's somebody who wrote on the page to where the typography would create a visual image.
Yeah, they were very visual poems, sometimes almost dimensional in the way that they were placed on the page. So I really love that. So I borrowed that as well. So a lot, I'm kind of taking pieces and putting them all together to make these.
All those things, as disparate as they seem to be, medium, era, whatever, they all have that same energy, right? Like that energy of dealing deeper in the world through abstraction and back is, and taking pieces and sort of rebuilding perception with the pieces. That is the energy of the work that inspired you, and of Cummings, and of your own modern practice to this point. So even though it's a lot going on, it actually has a very resonant kind of gestalt, I feel like, in the work. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
And the interesting thing about working kind of formally and abstractly, which I hadn't done prior to this, is that as hard as you try, it's really impossible to make anything 100% abstract or non-objective. There's always ideas and images and meaning that come through in the work. And this work also is a slight departure from earlier shaped collages, which were more somber in their color palette. These just became brighter, not only because I knew I was going to have a show with Mela, so I was looking for sources that were more bright and poppy, but I think that the timing of the show coming on the end of the COVID lockdown, I felt really hopeful. I moved, I got a new studio, I had a show lined up. I felt really hopeful in making these. And so the color kind of exploded. And, that idea of light and hopefulness, I think, just came out whether I was trying or not.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Ray. That's brilliant. And that's the perfect place to switch to Mela, who, in one sense, I would like to ask you, sort of the same question, like how you navigate the richness of color with, the proliferation of small individual detail. And then you have this whole physicality and this whole relationship, maybe not to the body and the landscape, but certainly to architecture and, public spaces and a sort of cosmic order. And I'm cheating because she and I have talked about this before, so I know that about the cosmic order. But at the same time, just like Ray, you have to wrangle all of that and figure out how to make objects that express that. And all of this color and all of the patience and all of the time you spend with your hands on this work, right? And the way that you install it in relationship to the space that it occupies. I think, that there'd be a lot to say about that as well. And I love knowing that you're the one who set the bar that high for chromatic marvel, that Ray felt inspired by you. And I just wanted to honor that for a second, because I think that's really brilliant. Anyway, it's really nice to see you here, Mela. And if you could just talk a little bit about how all of this works for you and the work, that would be amazing. And
thank you so much, Shana. Hi, everybody. My name is Mela M. And, one second. Okay, now I see everybody. And I just want to thank you everybody for coming here. And thank you so much, Shana and James and everybody who involved to organizing this beautiful Zoom meeting. And also thank you, Ray, for being my co-exhibitor. I'm still continue celebrating my birthday, so I just want to show you this beautiful color I have with the flowers and everything. So I love it so much. Oh my gosh. Anyways, this is where, you know, the color comes from nature. In 2017, traveled to Japan and stayed there 3 months in art residency. Had 2 solo exhibits. It just, you know, blew my mind. It was also April, and it was cherry blossoms everywhere. And it ended up being longer for 2 weeks than it typically would be. So I was really fortunate working many different places, seeing these gorgeous giant trees with the cherry blossoms on it, and also Japanese colorful kimono, you know, people walking around wearing these beautiful, colorful clothes. It was just really very exciting to me. Especially, you know, especially at night, late evening, with electrical lights, these cherry blossoms trees just look so magical, unbelievable. I always look flowers, nature, to get inspired with the color. And just going back to, I just, you know, think about this childhood stories, actually, you know, about the color impression, the first color impression I had. You know, I was a young teenager traveling with my mother, and I was in Crimea. I got my first easel ever and the watercolor paintings. So I was walking around painting landscapes, and just one time I really wanted to paint sunset. It was like very early sunset, so I was walking with an easel, looking around, and I didn't realize, you know, it's a beautiful place, Black Sea, mountains around, and so I ended up climbing the mountain, and I didn't realize actually how high I got. You know, I just wanted to have a nice, beautiful view to paint the sunset. So, and finally I got the great spot, the best spot I was able to find, and I started painting the sunset with watercolor. And it was just so magical for me at that moment. I felt like one with the sky, with this different color, orange and all kinds of bright color going like everywhere, just mind blowing. You know, and I just was mesmerized by that sunset, painting it. And I heard somebody calling me. And I looked, and there was 2 guys standing there. And one was an older man and then a younger man, and telling me, "Oh, wow, we were watching you when you were climbing this mountain. We thought you were gonna fall down and die." And I was like, "What?" You know, and I looked around, and then I realized how high I got. It was so high. And I was actually on a very separate spot. So it was a little pass road to get where I got, you know, and the pass road was kind of on the angle, very small. The rocks was going down. And those guys telling me, "Would you like us to help you to get out from over there? It's, you know, do you know how to get back?" And I kind of looked at them. I was, you know, it was 2 guys. I kind of felt like uncomfortable, and I said, "No, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'll be fine." You know, so they okay, and you know, and they left. I looked around. I realized that I've got somehow there that I don't even know how I got there. It was really high. The wind started a little bit going a little bit more. It started getting a little bit darker. I was wearing this silky dress with the flowers on it. It was kind of white dress with a kind of, I still remember, blue flowers. I had a long hair, was a little skinny girl. So I felt like I almost was, the wind was kind of almost was shaking me a little bit. So I got scared. I was looking at my painting and I loved it so much. And I was thinking with myself, gosh, I probably have to leave all this here because there's a little path road. I don't know how I'm even gonna get back. It's just so thin, impossible to go on it. So, but then I was looking at my painting and I felt like, no, I cannot leave it there. It's like became like a part of me. It's seriously, I just loved it so much, I couldn't leave it. So I put everything together, put an easel, and I got on my knees. I put an easel in front of me. I was on my knees, the rocks was going down, and I was pushing this easel forward, and I was like crawling on that little path road to get to a safe spot. And it took a while. I was shaky. The blood started getting from my knees. You know, the skin was scratched and all this. The dress was damaged, of course. And so finally I got in a, shaky, and I got in a safe spot. And I was still shaky, and then I was still looking at my, painting, and I was so attached to the painting. And there was some kind of awakening happens, like awakening. I was, I realized that it's so important to me. It's like a part of me that I couldn't leave it. I realized at that time, that I'm an artist or some kind of a person who loves this beautiful color that I like to paint, I like to explore, and actually being in Japan reminded me, I was thinking about that. It's this story, it's a true story, and it went through all my life, making me feel that, this is the thing I want to do. I didn't even know that, I will be, in the future, I will be an artist. At that time, I just felt so in love with this color, with a beautiful color. And, I read somewhere about the color that we only can actually see 0.32 of something, of a light and a color. So it's just, but what we can see, it's amazing. It's just amazing. Okay, go back to my paintings. If I can go see them finally. Haven't been talking too long.
Not at all. While they're calling that up, though, I just want to say, like, as you were telling that story, like, so much was happening in my mind. I almost couldn't believe it. But it was like, on the one hand, I'm seeing, okay, that's like the origin story of like a Marvel universe, like a superhero, right? Like, you're a little girl and you climb up this crazy mountain and the wind sweeps you, and I'm going to a whole make an illustrated graphic novel of this woman's life place with you, just emotionally. So awesome. But also, I'm looking at the work while you're talking, and I'm thinking, I've always wondered why. I mean, you're not like a particularly tall person, but
No.
you insist on making these archways and getting up there into the corners and the ceilings and the crevices of all these spaces. So even the piece that's behind you in your Zoom shot, I'm starting to see sunsets and mountains, and in a kind of expressionist, German expressionist kind of place. It has all of a sudden I just had a whole other universe of relating to your work open up while you were telling that super crazy story. So yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you did that, actually, because again, we're having this conversation about abstraction, but what we're learning about both of you is actually how much about the world it is, right? So it's kind of magic. So yeah, please continue.
Yeah, this work behind me, it's a piece of film electric bridge I created. It's 917 different angles. So I cut it all, it can construct it with his hands. Yes, and it was a crazy time. I was just painting, the stripes, triangles, like, and I couldn't stop. I wasn't eating. I wasn't like even drinking sometimes. There was just so many colors. I just want to finish this. And then just an excitement when you work with the color, it's mesmerizing. You know, when I was in Japan, I was working on this, you know, underwater cities idea. So when I came back from Japan, I started working on this idea about orbiting megatropolis losing gravity. I went to SpaceX, you know, and I was standing under that piece of rocket that went to space and back. And I was thinking about, you know, what Kazimir Marovich was talking about, going into unknown. You know, and making art for the purpose of making art only, you know, and just doing something different. One of my inspiration for many years, as well as Liszewski. There's so many others. Saul Levitt, what Ray mentioned, I also love his work very much. James Turrell inspired me. Oh my God, when from Claremont Graduate University, we went to Rodin Crater, and James Turrell actually showed us in person, the crater and toured us around, and we went to inside, and oh my God, it's just amazing place, one of the best actually places I've ever been, with how he construct everything, the color, the light, how it's going, and how it gives you this physical effect where you're going through the tunnel. It's almost like a different dimension or something. And then going about you know, thinking about different dimension. You know, in some of my work, I'm trying to create the impression of and otherworldly or other solar system technologies that actually does not look like anything we've ever seen orbiting our planet. This simply could be different section of megatropolis, like flying around, you know, having different function, also some kind of a orbiting parade. You know, some of those small pieces in this work, you know, they are together in a group of 8 pieces. And my work is also very textural. I like to build. For example, I build with wood. I build with, this is my palette knife, and I build with a palette knife. I shaped the acrylic. And for some of you who is not an artist, I just wanted to explain. I don't know if you can see, just an example. It's not a piece, it's just an example what I do. For example, this is a texture, this is acrylic built up on the wood. And so it takes me one layer first, this is yellow, for example. Then I go to blue, you know, and build it with my palette knife. Then I go to ultramarine blue color. And so, and I just continue building layers. It's a texture, you can see just that it's a dimensional. The way I build the shapes also, this is the way I build the shapes also. You know, and also the shape sometimes comes in my dream. And then I draw it down, I'll sketch it down. It's just the dreams what I have. It's just like Carl Jung says it. It comes from your unconscious to your consciousness. You bring something that wants to release, that you want to release, and it comes when you know, in my dream while I sleep.
I love that. I mean, I definitely think, you know, I mean, there's a lot in there, but it all kind of, it kind of makes sense. It's this idea of like, you know, we were talking about a minute ago, this idea of like the hidden structure that's kind of behind everything, and that you're actually bringing that out and kind of, you know, recreating it. And what I love especially about the sculptural work with you, is that it's not, is that it is itself. In other words, the fact that you're making each individual component and kind of building it means that it not only references architecture and masonry and things like that and engineering, but it actually enacts those things, because you're literally building, like, you know, piece by piece, brick by brick, you know, board by board, the way that you would build a structure, a temple, so that there's, you know, it's more than the idea of those things. It's actually like the performance of those things. And I feel like there's something really powerful about this idea that it's kind of coming from that crazy world. I love that you mentioned both Malevich and Carl Jung. Those are like my parents, basically. And, you know, this idea to, by the way, Elda Zitsky and I have the same birthday. Just,
Oh my gosh.
the same day. Just to let you know, a little trivia, a little bit about
Wow.
me.
Oh,
But
wow.
that whole Russian world of like Tatlin and like all of them, and this idea of, you know, breaking things down into abstraction so that it would be universal, and then recreating patterns from the world in a way that would trigger a kind of experience in the consciousness of the viewer, so that it was an object, but it was more like a portal or something for this whole other world of contemplation. Yes. And I feel like that's something that has always been interesting to me. It's like why I went into the field of art history. So I love that you have that, but at the same time, a lot of those guys were very reductive in their palette: black, red, white,
Yes.
maybe blue sometimes. So this, to have that energy but transposed into this kaleidoscope of your relationship with color, I find very, very fascinating and very impactful.
Thank you. Yes, going back to Levinsky, you know, remember this prawn room? It's a prawn that's made up Russian word for something like project in a new something, you know. So he created that room where he put all his geometric shapes paintings, which became, it was more than 100 years ago, it became like a part of the wall, part of the architecture. And can you please stop with this piece and just keep it here, Chris, right? Please keep this piece. And so, and I really love how he created this effect when you come into the room that you feel like a different portal or different something, so you're part of it also. And this was kind of my attention in a way also. How painting becomes architecture, how, you know, drawings become architecture. And I had Dr. Vellet, Jean Vellet, she wrote several essays for me. And in 2002, she wrote this, for this catalog, she wrote a beautiful essay. I don't know if you can see, it's called A Memory and Metonymy. And she was talking about in-betweenness. And she was talking for the artist, the state of betweenness is a complex and ever-changing condition, you know, producing the series of rethinking of painting, an environment of memory that shift the ground between drawings and construction, between translucency and texture, between architecture and painting. Mela M does not make painting, does not make sculpture, does not make architecture, does not make architecture. She does all these things and more. She makes memories out of metonymic fragments that float up the surface of the new kind of architectonic painting. The art of Mela M needs to be understood as theoretic hybrid and common condition of postmodern art. And always on the way to, you know, different ideas. And so in betweenness in my work. this piece called Betwixt and Between in Everything Seen, Betwixt and Between in Everything Seen, means some things or the mystery or secret exists somewhere between 2 points. But no matter where we look, it's the same thing. It's always between 2 places. So it's everywhere. And so it's nowhere. You know,
I love that. I love that. And just real quick to let Ray back into the conversation so we can see a little bit about how you guys both interact as well. What made me think of that is when you were talking about that state of in-betweenness, and it's neither one thing nor the other, but this other thing that's kind of becoming, I thought, I bet Ray has thoughts about that too, because the way that he moves in the painting, sculpture, abstraction, object space, right. I think a lot of resonance with those incredible thoughts that you were just sharing. So I just wanted to tap Ray and let you know, like, if you want to respond to any of that, and we can all get a little more free form now. We have about 15 minutes left. So if people have questions, raise your hand, whatever, get our attention. And like, let's all talk. Because those are big, beautiful ideas.
I think that's why I was attracted to Mela's work when I first saw it, and I felt a resonance between our work, was that, you know, her work is definitely more referencing kind of Russian constructivism, architecture, and literal sculpture, but it does kind of live in between several different genres. And I love that about the work. I also love how high key the color is. It just slaps you in the face with color. It's like, it really wakes you up. If you ever want to wake up in the morning, just like turn on your computer and go to Mela's website, and that'll shake you up. That'll shake you up.
So Japan, it's just really Japan. And your work is also, you know, I like that your work has surprises that, like, for example, on one side you see one thing, on the opposite side you see something else. And it's a very beautiful surprise. This is what I like in my work also. This is
totally. I mean, I could take one of your little sculptures and just sit there and turn it around and look at it. There's something going on every surface, and mine is relatively, you know, front and back, so it's fairly simplistic. Hers just spatially is so complex, and she spends a lot of time, you know, paying attention to every little detail, so it makes for a very rich experience, and I love that about it.
There are a lot of details. Yes, when I was thinking about the journey through abstract reciprocal perspectives, you know, from the terrestrial to architectonic orbital, I was thinking about Ray's work, you know, the historic images he was building up on plywood in a particular shape, where the images, part of it was not there, part of it there. So showing different angles and gives this kind of a beautiful historic representations that people can question things in a different way. So I was attracted to that, and the title came out this way because, like, Shana was talking about really wonderful about this title description, and this is how it came out. And so,
we have a question from Steve who entered in the chat, a really excellent question, I think, having to do, it's a question for Mela, but it's so at the center of everything we've been talking about today is, the question, I'll read it. Scroll back. I was wondering if you plan to add figures or people to your sculptures. Speaking of it as otherworldly experiences, I envision what being's life would be like amongst it, just a thought. But I love that thought because it's like, for now, we are the people in there, right? You're like, both of you, and even with having something on the back, you're making me use my body to experience the full work. And so in a sense, in both of you in different ways, we are the people that live on your planet. But both of you have very different relationships to including actual imagery and, God forbid, narrative within the work itself. And I would love, first Mela, because that question was for you, but Ray, if you have any thoughts as well, like just how you think about that. And you know, the answer can be no, I've been there and dismissed it, or the answer can be, you know, that you wrestle with it. Like, I'm super curious now too, Steve. That's a great question.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
you.
thinking right now about the Heisenberg, you know, idea of uncertainty. You know, some people can see, you know, a figurative walking somewhere, and the other ones see something else. It's all filters through your experience, your background, your schooling, you know, and social, economic, and all kinds of ideas. Anyway, but figurative, in a way, like for example, I don't know if you can see this. This piece is going to a museum in Japan pretty soon, but this is kind of could be look like a figurative. And somebody actually told me that it's kind of almost like a kimono, you know, because it's Japan. It's just in my head all the time. Almost look like a kimono. But personally, I've done some figurative work before. 3 decades ago, and I was making futuristic figurative compositions, like 5 people together, like 5 different me, or space continuum, something like that. I've done some. I've taught actually anatomy and figure drawing classes. So yeah, but at this time, and it's been some time for me when I feel like less is more. And then now I feel like I just want to explode all this color in me. And like Ray was mentioning actually that during the pandemic, and he felt it. And I know a lot of artists actually felt it the same as he did, because we wanted to have this hope. We wanted to, you know, like Marc Chagall was saying, the only palette I use in my, you know, work, it's the palette, the color of love. You know, and he, yes, and he got brighter, he got, you know, and it's beautiful. You know, it's surprising because he, you know, I was, you know, when we were talking with him, yes, he said that, yeah, he want to go brighter color. And I was really, you know, looking forward to see what he's gonna come up with, you know. If I'm, Ray, if you want to say anything.
Getting back to that comment about figures in the work, possibility of figuration. Whenever I look at Mela's work, they kind of look like little asteroids to me, little space stations. I could totally see little tiny figures climbing all over them. Shana, you're muted, by the way. I think you said right.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
right. And I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, like beings. Maybe
Yeah.
they're beings, but it feels so much like a place.
Yeah, it feels like a
You
space
know.
station, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Whereas my work, I don't see that as much. There's kind of figurative elements that kind of creep in, and just, you know, they're incidental. They're not what I'm trying to do, but they're incidental from the material I use. But yeah, I can totally see some melding of figurative abstract work with Mela's. If I were to take that work myself and rework it, I'd put in little tiny
it really feels like a structure you can enter,
Yeah.
or a place you can visit,
Temple.
an asteroid, a space station, a temple.
Yeah.
And so the way the human brain is, we can't help it. We want to
Yeah.
know then what happens in there, what's going on there, what is life like there, because it really does present a there, which is, you know, which I'm harping on, because technically it's abstract color, you know, technically it's not a place, it's not an image even, almost. So the fact that that energy is so there and that we all see it and feel it, I think is really remarkable. So I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. Yeah.
Thank you. And, you know, in my work, I also want to show and indicate the mystery that we all feel but cannot say. Because the mystic artists are the keepers of the secrets. You know, they wanted to protect those secrets from the mainstream zeitgeist that try to destroy and hurt them. You know, imagination is the source of everything. because the feminine imaginal, you know, flies all the way down into this infinite energy fields, you know, that plays our DNA like an orchestra. And so we as a music of it and the great art, you know, the record of it, that, you know, when you were talking about the the figures, all kinds of, you know, spaceships or cities or something here and there, I like that. I love it actually, and I like the mystery of it. I'm a kind of, you know, I'm an introvert. I'm a secretive person. Sometimes I feel like, you know, I like to keep it to myself. This is just how I am. But I like to talk also about my
You're
art.
not an introvert, Mela.
Oh, really?
You know the meaning of the word introvert?
I know, introvert. You are extrovert. You're clearly extrovert.
No, I'm the introvert over here.
Oh, no way, you. No. But I felt like, you know, I like to, you know, keep something like in my work, like the mystery of it, the secrets, the how I made it. Even sometimes just keep it just something for myself and not say everything. And it feels like in the work that people wanted to study it and understand how I build it. I have a lot of questions. I used to have a studio for 11 years at the Brewery Art Complex, like 1,700 square feet, 40 feet ceilings. And I had this the Southern California Institute of Art and Architecture students was going to visit my studio. I was going to the institute and to the library over there, but they were inspiring about my work and I learned about it. And I really love that, you know, connection, you know, and sharing something. And they are different, they looking different, they are architects, you know, and I am a painter, you know, but at that time, you know, I made some minimalistic paintings, but I was still constructing the shapes. And I had different companies like Bigger Liesel helping me to construct. Then he passed away anyway. Anyways, any other questions?
I have a question for Ray, and then Jody has a question for Mela, and then I think that by the time we do that, it might be our time. So I just want to put that out there. But my question for Ray, and it's a little unfair because I read Jody's question for Mela, and I was like, oh, that's a good question. But first, it makes me want to actually ask Ray this other question. So here it goes. Okay. Because Jody's question for Mela is going to be about like the meditative or kind of ritualistic, very analog process of putting the work together. There was an earlier question about how long it takes, and like there's a lot of physicality in that. And I want to get to that in a minute, but it made me think, Ray, of your work because you talk about art history, but actually I feel like there's a very, very contemporary, almost like post-internet quality to the way you work as well, in the way that you just voraciously sample things from everywhere and create these single objects that are like a million things at once with lots of different parts, distinct parts. And that reminds me of the internet. So I did want to ask you
in the other room. I got 5 minutes.
Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Housekeeping.
So the question, Shana, sorry, I got a little distracted.
Yeah. So the question is, as much as you talk about reaching back into art history for your inspiration, I'm realizing that there's a lot of like a post-digital or a post-internet aesthetic to all of the gathering that you do and all of the many, many things you put into single images. So I wanted to,
I think the internet is the greatest tool ever invented for artists, and I use it daily, and I'm sure most artists do, and I have since, 2000. It's the greatest way to source images, to find out information. I've done many projects that were completely based on the internet, and so I do look back to art history. I mine, images out of auction catalogs and art history books, but I do get a lot of stuff online as well. And I'm just a vacuum sucking up information and images, but that's what the internet has allowed us to do. And I'm, you know, I fully own that I live in the 21st century, and it's hard to deny that. But also, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit POMO, taking a little bit of everything and blending it all up to find, you know, something with new meaning.
Yeah, and I love.
Yeah, I like this post-digital. That's a great way to term it.
Yeah. Oh, POMO. I mean, if I wish that the first wave of postmodernism was as engaging as yours is, honestly. It just made me mad before.
They didn't have the internet. That was the problem.
Exactly. That was the problem. That was the missing ingredient. Let's try again.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's a little insight into my brain. Is Jody asked a question about meditation and like inner vision. And I'm like, oh, let's talk about the internet. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just a little like what goes on in here is not always, but thank you for that. Cause I really wanted to like honor because I love people who, you know, who reanimate art history and who bring art history into the present. But I also really wanted to honor the extreme contemporaneousness of your aesthetic and at the same time. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so this can be the last question. It's for Mela, but anyone can answer. And it comes from Jody, and it was tapping into the energy of the physical making. Also, again, related to, there was a previous question about the time frame. Like, are we talking a week, a month, 72 hours without sleep? Are you in like a fugue state? Like what's happening when all of this activity is coming through your body, Mela, in the studio?
Oh, thank you, Jody. I'm not surprised that this question came from you. Thank you very much. And it's a very good question. And yes, I meditate constantly. You know, I'm a certified yoga instructor, and I do Shotokan karate. It's a Japanese karate for years. So the meditation is very important to me. During the pandemic time, for example, I was meditating on the sadhana boards like almost every day. It's basically, I show you, I'm actually on it right now. It's like a nails like this on the board. It's just one. You can lean down. I have a larger size nails. So, and you can stand on it. I just like the feeling of it, because make your mind a little bit more clear, you more self-centered. And that piece I actually did, one of the pieces, we're not gonna go there showing, but was designed on a bed of nails. So I have several pieces actually on a nail pedestal, and I wrote a poetry about it. Of course, we're not going to read any, no time, but the idea, just finding balance. And I try to find balance. Like, I like to challenge myself with asymmetrical balance and multiple colors and asymmetrical balance.
Which is very Japanese. Like the whole theory of ikebana, ritual flower arrangement, is all about that principle of asymmetrical balance. So that doesn't surprise me at all. That makes a lot of sense.
Great comment. A great comment, Shana. You really you really understand this. Yes. Also, when you do karate, the katas, it's some kind of a movement. It's organizes you. It center you also. It's make you feel more together, stronger. And it's important for me as a female artist, sometimes in a male world of art, going to applying and to museums and galleries, male dominate, always a museum, 70% male, 30% less maybe than 30% of female. The same applies to galleries too. So yes, it makes me feel as a female artist, just center myself, focus, and in art, the same thing. I try to find that balance. It sounds very basic. I know it sounds very basic. Oh, we try to find balance. We all try to find balance, but it's just how I feel. Color, shapes, build. Even when you build with your hands and put the shapes together, you meditate and try to find balance. You know, when you observe something like, you know, sand or nature, you try to find balance in it. I like, you know, the stories of, you know, reading the stories about master and a teacher. For example, you know, the story, like student come to a teacher and ask, what is the path? And the master said, you know, everyday life is the path. Can we study it? If you study it, you will be more far away from it. Then the student say, if I don't study, how I can understand it's a path? And teacher replies, the path does not belong to the ordinary world of perception, and it doesn't belong to the non-world of perception. And thinking can lead you to delusion, and non-thinking, it's actually senseless. So, so if you want to reach the true path of beyond David, place yourself as a freedom, as a sky. But don't name it neither good or bad. You know, and this kind of stories I love. I read this kind of stories, and actually from this kind of story, I had some ideas in my work. We don't have time to talk about it, but it just brings me this kind of thinking. You know, just I have a lot of work that has stories behind it. You know, and they are kind of meditative. Yes, when you read this kind of stories, I love the stories that in uplifting. You know, like Judy's work. Judy, she's really good in you know, the details work. You know, I really love that in her work. Yes, thank you for that question, Judy.
Thank you. Oh my God, you guys! I told you it was gonna go fast, didn't I? I was like, it's gonna go fast, and you're like, no, these things go on forever. Well, it's already been
Good
like
job, Shana.
more than an hour because that was so amazing. I'm just happy I was present for that. That was one of my favorite artist talks ever. I'm not even kidding. I do not say that all the time. I almost never say that actually. So I really mean it. Ray, Mela, James, each of you is such a treasure. And together, I think, what a perfect conversation for this moment. And yeah, there really is this energy explosion of, you know, that matches, I think, the optimism of the season that I hope we're all feeling in our lives right now. So if you haven't made it over in person, it's very easy to do that. If you can get over the Miracle Mile, do yourself a favor and check it out. And gosh, just like, thank you so much for having me be part of this today. I really loved it. And James, Ray, Mela, congratulations on a beautiful exhibition.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Shana.
everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Shana.
everybody.
Thank you,
We'll
James.
see you at the gallery soon.
Thanks for coming.
You have until Saturday to see the show, people,
That's
so
right.
get on over there.
Yeah, and by
please, you can do it.
Yes, you can do it.
Bye.
Love you guys.
Bye, everybody.
You.
love you. Thank you.
And make sure your camera's on.